element there, right? The Enlightenment types, especially after the French Revolution, generated this narrative that science and religion were radically opposed, and that if you were on the side of religion, you were against clear, rational, logical thinking. And so you could imagine a stream of anti-Christian sentiment emerging on the rationalist side, right? But it isn't obvious to me at all that the leftist types who don't talk about Wilberforce are anti-Christian because they're scientific rationalists.
No.
Like, no
way.
All you have to do is talk to them for like 15 seconds and you find out that that's not the case. They might use those arguments from time to time, but they certainly don't apply the rigors of scientific thinking to their own radical hypotheses. So it's deeper than that. And so what is it exactly that they're objecting to? Is it the fact that the more radical leftist story, Marxist, let's say, is in its essence anti-Christian, which I think is a fair statement, but why would that be more important? This is the strange thing. Why would that be more important than serving the poor and fighting for the abolition of slavery and all of its associated prejudices? Because it still doesn't get you out of the conundrum, which is why not Wilberforce? Instead of tearing down statues, why not erect statues to him? Yeah. So, well, I know that's a hard thing to sort out, but you got any? Yeah, obviously you were feeling something this in high school,
that's
right?
Correct.
You guys are throwing out the baby with the bathwater here.
Correct.
Yeah. Which baby exactly?
So my initial thought is that the leftist types, the ones that really understand it, they do not seek to achieve what a Wilberforce type figure would want, which is actual liberation and actual eradication of evil.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, I think they just want to be in charge.
Yeah, no, I think...
And
okay, so let's pivot on that for a minute. Okay, so, because this is a problem that's going to face the right, and is already, and we can talk about that. So, there are a group of people, 4% of the population, and then there's still a fringe around that would maybe be another 5% where you'd have to take it seriously. And so, they're in the psychiatric diagnostic literature, they fall under the cluster B heading. Okay, they're histrionic, which means they're dramatic, and I suppose if they're healthy and histrionic, then they become actors, right, and entertainers. So there's a positive spin on that. But if they're negative histrionic, they dramatize their pathology and use it as a weapon. Okay, they're narcissistic, which means they want unearned social status. They're psychopathic, which means they're predatory parasites, and they're antisocial, and that's just your standard criminal types. So that all fits in cluster B. Then there's personality traits that go along with that. Machiavellian, they use language not to convey information, but to manipulate, and to manipulate instrumentally for their own purposes. So if I'm speaking with you in a Machiavellian manner, I have a goal in mind that has nothing to do with the words that I'm using. You may have talked to journalists like that many times.
Many times.
Yes, many times.
So
okay. So they're Machiavellian.
That's so well said.
They're narcissistic. Again, that's an overlap. They're psychopathic. Oh, yes. And on the personality side, that associates with sadism. And so all of that culminates in a personality style that has the proclivity to take positive delight in the unnecessary suffering of others. Okay, so now those people, let's say they're 4% of the population. Okay, so this is what they do, is they look for a story that's working. Could be Christianity, Judaism, Marxism, could be conservatism, doesn't matter what the story is. They look to see where it has purchase. So where the people who play that game have power. They infiltrate that, they advertise themselves as the vanguard of that movement, and they do that for no other reason than to gain power. Right, and so this is politically agnostic. Now they'll guise themselves in political cloaks, and they'll learn all the tropes. I mean, this sort of thing, you can see this sort of thing emerging like mad on the right, on Twitter, for example. But it's been characteristic of the left for a long time, insofar as the left has power. But, you are the one who just said, I think they want power.
Yes.
That's part of that You know, in the biblical tradition, there's a battle always between the ethos that brings abundance, so that would be the miraculous provision of fish and bread and water that never exhausts itself. That's all consequence of a particular kind of ethos, the one that Wilberforce embedded. That's juxtaposed against usurpation, Luciferian usurpation of power, right? That's the temptation that Christ is offered in the desert, right? The third temptation is the temptation of power.
Right, the whole world.
Yeah, that's right. And one of the things that's Moses is punished brutally by God for using power near the end of his...
And for thinking he has the power to actually make water come out of the rock.
Well,
not
yeah,
God.
that it's dependent on
That's
him.
on him, not God.
Yeah.
That's
Well, and worse than that, not only on him, but on it, God tells him to invite with his words, and he uses force and authority, right? So he doesn't enter the promised land. So that's a good indication of the danger of power, even when wielded by someone who is estimable, right? Because you have to give Moses his due.
A lot of credit.
Right, well, exactly.
For dealing with that group.
Yeah, and then, of course, that's the temptation that's offered Christ. So I do think it's a power game.
Yes.
And then there's a commandment not to use God's name in vain. And then there's the comments in the Gospels about the Pharisees, right? The Pharisees are exactly the people who use religious terminology, so moral terminology, to cloak their power-seeking machinations, right? And Christ goes after them. I think the best account of that is in Matthew, where he tells them that they're like, it's pretty brutal, that they're like...
broods of vipers, yeah.
Worse, they're like graves full of rotting bodies that someone whitewashed, right? And he says that if they would have, they're the people, had they been alive in the time of the prophets they purport to follow, they would have been part of the mob that would have killed them, right? That's actually part of, you may know this, but that's part of what sets them up for the crucifixion,
right,
because they're not very happy with those insults publicly delivered. But that shows you also how old the problem is. So you can imagine one of the worst possible sins is to take the highest possible virtue, so that would be, well, we stand for the oppressed, we stand for the poor, and then to gerrymander that so that your standing for that only pushes you towards power.
That's right.
Right. And so, and then it also, there's a clue in the Gospels, I think it's in the Gospels as well, about how you figure that out. And the answer is, by their fruits you will know them, right? So you look at, well, what I've done is I looked at the consequences, for example, of the green energy programs in Germany and the UK. Well, what's the consequence? Let's take Germany. Germany pollutes far more per unit of energy than they did 10 years ago, and their energy prices are 5 times as high. They're completely dependent on dictators of the worst sort.
Yes.
They continue to make the same mistakes. They're deindustrializing very, very cataclysmically. It's destabilizing their political environment, and that falls disproportionately on the poor. I don't see a way around that analysis.
And nature worshiping is not anything new. All throughout the scriptures.
No, that's right.
Elijah, I mean, is that whole story is a manifestation of the nature worshipers versus the belief in God. But back to just to reiterate a very profound point you made. In evangelical circles, we get wrong, which is people think do not take the Lord's name in vain, just to say do not say God in an expletive way. It actually, the word is don't carry the name's Lord, the name of the Lord in vain, meaning don't do actions in the name of God. So you're exactly right. And so people wear the costume of the holy, or they appropriate.
Well, that's exactly what Christ tells the Pharisees. Literally, he says they wear the garbs of the priestly to elevate their moral status.
And this is what we believe is partially blaspheming the Holy Spirit, which is to take all of the trappings of religion.
Oh, that's interesting.
And to do evil in that name. We believe that is one of the, if not the most evil.
So that you think that's the transgression against, okay, so that's interesting because, so my psychological understanding of the idea of the Holy Spirit is that